Good morning and welcome to Green Alignment Podcast episode number 4. I am Kay Kellison.
I'm Mary Cay.
And good morning.
Good morning.
Following up our podcast last week about what is posture work, recapping all the conversations had prior, and then the difference between posture work and physical therapy. So I think this week it'd be fun to talk about, how does our mindset impact our body posture and vice versa?
That's the question. Okay. So mindset and posture. Okay. So I think a simple one that might read well, for you to see when we're looking at each other here is, okay, I'm sad, so, my head kind of drops. I'm feeling vulnerable, I'm feeling, I'm kind of drawing into myself. If you saw someone who is in this kind of posture, you might think, are they feeling, a little abstract? How are you okay? Your posture is communicating to me, that maybe things aren't okay. So what is a posture that makes you feel powerful?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of times we think about, soldiers, we stand up straight, line our spine, throw our shoulders back, feeling our head lifts up. Posture communicates so much to people around us. And it can be very much a reflection of a variety of things that are happening in the body, as well as the emotions and the mental state.
Yeah. That's what it means by mindset. It's really where you're at emotionally at the time and how your body reacts to that emotion.
I think that these patterns can become ingrained in the body, so say, what do I want to say? Say your parents always told you to
sit up straight.
Yeah, sit up straight, stand up straight. And so you
don't hunch over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, Mary still does that. You do.
I do not, actually. She's full of okay, so anyway, so maybe you get into a habit over time, because you've taken that into your body and you're wanting to feel powerful and you're flaring your rib cage out, and that rib cage flare becomes a part of your everyday posture. And then how that translates, that has an effect up. You can see how my head is thrown back by that. And then I have to bring my head forward, to compensate for the fact that my rib cage has been lifted. So yes, it is something that can become habit. If you are someone who spends a lot of time in recliners, you may be constantly, with the shoulders rolled forward. Yeah.
When you're the way you're talking, because I'm the one that, with my knee injuries and stuff, I had to use a recliner because I had to do that elevation.
The elevation of the leg.
And some recliners are better than others, and most of them are not really healthy for you. But, since I've been laid off and everything, I do art. I do lots of work on the computer, as well as like writing and stuff. And I sit in the recliner, and I am noticing, because of the posture work, it does acknowledge, like you almost get in tune with your body when you're doing this work.
Because absolutely. Well, even just right now, I've assumed this posture. Then Kay started talking, right? So I'm still sitting in this posture because I want to finish my thought.
Yeah, go ahead.
But just sitting here in this state, I start to check in with myself emotionally, and I'm feeling, I don't know, introspective and maybe a little like, I want to come back into alignment, because that's what's natural and relaxed for me. I think a lot of people look at me and they go, wow, she has really good posture. I've actually heard that a lot of my life.
Yeah.
And the reason being is because when I was fairly young, I started into dance. And, that gives you that elongated quality, and you train a lot of muscles
Yeah,
in that
I
way.
noticed that when I first saw you in the restaurant before we started dating, and just the way you presented yourself. And I've had friends who are dancer, and my past sister was a really good dancer, and she was going through training in ballet. And I think all dancers has that level of posture,
Mhm.
but I think even that also restricted you
Absolutely.
on how to do it. So
Yeah. It's interesting because while I may have had this upright posture, I found out later once I went into posture work that I was doing a lot of other
yeah,
funky things. Like I went into ballet pretty late in life and I was just muscling that turnout. I was trying to get my feet to come out and do the ballet thing, but I was using my quads, to really pull those out. And so I developed these amazing muscular
and you're
legs,
arching your back.
completely imbalanced. Like I had all this external rotation in my legs and I couldn't internally rotate. So suddenly I'd go break into a quick jog to the car and I'd twist my ankle. I was like, I could leap across the floor, but I couldn't run to my car.
Well, and it kind of leads me into the next question
Mm.
about this. How does the body communicate the imbalance?
Oh,
And how do you help people listen to their own body
wow. I mean, those two
more
very different
deeply?
questions. Okay, so the
You
first
can
one
break it
was
down, yeah.
how does the body feel imbalanced? Okay, I think that patterns within the body, especially habitual things, say that you're at your computer, right? And you're under some pressure and your shoulders creep up. That's very common, right? Because we're here and we're feeling tension and we're pulling it into these upper traps. And that can become a habit. You're sitting there 6, 8, 10 hours a day, feeling that pressure, feeling that stress. There's a lot going on in my upper body right now, which is very much imbalanced. And how will I eventually feel that? I could be getting headaches. I could be getting neck tension. My head's, you can't see it from the side, but my head's very forward in this position. So that could, and then I could, be pulling my head, it's just, there's so much habitual muscular engagement that can go on in the body.
And not even be aware of it.
Yeah, you're not even conscious of
Yeah,
it. That's just normal to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you get, in that particular position, all this muscular tension here, elongation through the back part of the spine, collapse slash tension over contraction of of these muscles across the chest. And then you stand up and you're still like that.
And the best part about this, and this is where coaching comes into play. This is where you want to have that first initial consultation, because well, first the consultation is like if you want to do it or not, and it's really your commitment to yourself. Secondly, when you do want to commit to this and even learn about it, the next step, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you meet with Mary, whether it's virtually or in person. And especially I would encourage do it in person if you're local, but then don't worry about Zoom because it's an amazing tool to help her assess your body. But then you go through the photos. She takes photos straight, back, side, and side. And it's really amazing on seeing your body and actually noticing the imbalance. And so with that, like part of this initial consultation, which is extremely important to understand and really understand where your body is, these photos are amazing to assess. And she sits with you and shows you, and you start to be more in tune with your body. So how do you coach a person who kind of wants to resist? Like no one wants to look at your own photos, right? You're in your bra or your skivvies, or you're in shorts and a tank top. And instead of really opening your mind, because most of us don't like the way our bodies look and stuff. Let's just be real. We want to correct things. This is where you start. So to me, how do you help a person, like take for me, right? Or take some of your clients, have them understand or how to listen and make the change while they're doing the process. Does that make sense? Like
Mm.
you have your assessment, you have a plan, you have your handy dandy app,
Okay.
you have Mary as your coach. How do you help people stay focused on the actions instead of the visuals?
Mm.
Because sometimes I think when you see yourself, and like for me, I don't really feel attractive sometimes. So when taking a picture, you're kind of like, oh my God, I
Yeah.
look
Well, there's a
ugly.
lot of resistance that comes up even with taking the
Yeah.
picture.
And
And
I
it's like, oh,
think,
well, how much skin? Maybe
yeah,
I'll just wear my sweater. I'll wear my baggy sweats. Is that okay? Um, one thing that I'm not putting your pictures up on YouTube. We're not
right.
like publishing these for the world to see. You're like, this is just for you to see and for me to see. And we sit side by side. Two, it's not about, the aesthetics of the body at this point that we're talking about. We're looking really at, if I could show you a picture, like
Do you
how
have pictures?
does the ear align with the shoulder, align with the hip, align with the ankle. And if we were to be able to see a straight line, say we'll put it at the ankle and see where it rises up through those various joints from the side perspective, you may see that someone's, hyperextending their knees, they're leaning way back, but they've got their head way forward, and they've kind of, they're, and then you're just like, you look at that and you're like, wow, I look like I'm not well aligned. I can see that. It's easy for you to see my shoulders. For me, I have a tendency to grip in this upper trap. So, in my pictures, even when I'm trying to look natural, but it's really kind of impossible to
Right.
be, um, you know, just natural in a picture. You're always doing something a little funny, but regardless, that shoulder's always high. It's
Yeah.
like, let it down.
Yeah.
That's a habit. And it's also doing that to compensate for something else. So, yeah, we look at the pictures and we try to take a step back from looking at ourselves and going, oh, God,
Yeah.
look at my thighs.
But it leads to the other question too, because it's all falling into my questions like emotionally. We when you start anything, I think emotionally you have this concept of what it may be or what it's going to be. And then you realize the reality of is that you have to start at a vulnerable position, because I think sometimes people think they have an idea and they have a goal and they have certain steps to take, and they don't take consideration of some of the things that could prevent you to achieve those goals, and therefore you stop.
Okay.
And I think emotionally, and you have to make an emotional or mental shift to understand to yourself. I mean, Mary can be your coach forever, but she doesn't know what goes up in here and what's happening around your life other than what you want to share with Mary. But sometimes I think, again, and I mentioned it last, we self-sabotage, because to me, I could have taken those pictures and I'm like, I look awful, I don't want to do this, and it's that's where the coaching, not the therapist, because Mary's not a therapist, she's a coach. She wants to hear that. She wants to hear where you at, because then she can help you just navigate through the muddy waters of our brain to start making you feel that, it's okay to feel vulnerable. It's okay to have that hesitation. I think what empowers us through the coaching and through ourselves is that we have to push through it. Like anything else, we have bad habits, and now we're going to change them into good habits. And you just have to take one step at a time. So, how does your clients experience through posture work coaching? Like, how does that help? Can you dive a little bit more on your coaching ability to where to make that person comfortable, or is that even a question that makes sense? Like, I don't know.
Um,
I mean, you can address it however you want.
okay. One, I want to be careful about calling things good or bad.
Yeah.
We just are. Even pain, we think, oh, pain, bad. Well, actually, pain is data, it's information, it's our body communicating with us. And so You could look at pain as being a good thing, value judgments around how we look, um, are, I would say, difficult for us to process.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think human beings were raised around mirrors and cameras. And so it's really difficult, I think, for us to see ourselves from that angle, because really, I don't think that we evolved with so much ability to look at ourselves. It's like, geez, that critic comes into play. But if we can look at the pictures and, take a step back, we can get some great information, data that we can use. When you're working with a coach, I'd say the number one item of importance is why.
Yeah.
What is that you're hoping to achieve? Where are you hoping to go? A coach can help come into that space with you, get to know you, help you know that this is a trusting relationship and that it's safe.
Yeah.
A coach listens to what you're saying and then might be able to help you perhaps turn your perspective, make shifts to see things from a slightly different angle.
Well,
My
and,
dog
and
just showed up.
yeah.
This is Winston.
But it's also, it's sort of like in the business and corporate world and stuff like that. It's like a mentorship too. It's like the mentor is there to help you achieve your goals or maybe guide you through their experiences and stuff. But they're not there to tell you or give you all the answers. They're not telling you how to do it, when to do it, what time to do it. They may suggest ideas based on their experience, based on their own level of training. And we seek mentors to improve ourselves. So it's no different than a coach. A coach is there to help you embrace some of the difficulties that you can't come to your own conclusion. And so when you're experiencing that, I think it's very imperative, if that's the right word, to share with Mary, regardless of how vulnerable you feel or how guilty you feel of, like, maybe you didn't do it. Like, I don't feel guilty because I didn't do my routine for the last 4 months or whatever. But I kept on talking to Mary. I kept on saying, I just feel down. I don't feel motivated. It's not you, it's not PTX, it's me. And the more I understood, I had to allow myself to process a mourning period after losing my job and stuff. And sometimes we just don't fucking feel like doing things because we're in our own mindset. However, luckily for me, I live with a coach. And so, she always checked in on me. And then when I start to embrace, like, you know what, I have to move. I'm the type of person that if I don't move, I get really down and I get kind of blah. And so I think it's really important to embrace the vulnerability, but don't be afraid to share that with Mary, the coach, because she's there to help you, right? You're not there to answer all the questions. You don't have the answers to everything, but you certainly have the answers on how to address your body imbalance or how to make your body more balanced. Embrace some of the difficulties and work with her. And eventually you're going to have some of the answers that you seek, and you won't know until it actually happens, that breakthrough, right?
I think that another thing that's slightly different about posture work, or quite different, is that it truly is what I call a co-creative process.
Yeah.
So you have to bring the information. You bring yourself, you do the testing, you do the assessment of the pictures, or we do that together. But then you also bring what you're willing to do.
Yeah.
And that can change over time. Let me use myself as an example. When I was very, very first starting, and I was reading that very first book by Peter Goskew, I was like, there was like talking about how movement is important every day. I'm like, yeah, sure. We move every day. Yeah, what? I walk the dog and I do the dishes, or, I walk back and forth to the store, movement. Well, the thing is that the body has evolved to be in a much more movement rich environment. Our modern life is very much about comfort and being having the comforts and the ease of other people doing things for us, right? And so we can just pick up the phone and call, and food shows up at the door. We don't have to get up and go to the store and buy the food and make the food and, etc. So technology, convenience, unfortunately, that's left us in a very movement poor environment, and our body is suffering because it wasn't evolved to work that way. And so what posture work does is it brings some very specific movements into your life that you do on a daily basis. I was like, daily? Wait a minute. Where's my rest day? Where's my restoration day? I need, daily. What are we talking about? Because I was doing yoga and I was doing myofascial release and I was doing a variety of aerobics and weightlifting, etc. I got rest days. Where are my rest days? And it's like, well, actually, the human, if you think about the human of the past, they had to move every day. Why? Because they needed water, they needed food, they needed safety, and they had to create, all of those things around them. And so what we, in conjunction with other humans and, so this process, as opposed to me saying, okay, this is what your body needs. Here, do these exercises. Let me show you how. And then good luck, well, I'll see you next week. I need to know from Kay, how much time she has. I have to know what she's willing to do. And I think that changes over time.
Yeah.
So when I first started, I would do it, maybe 3 days a week, because that's what you do. You exercise 3 days a week, right?
Well, in essence, 3 days a week is good, because when you start with this process, from my experience, you move muscles that you haven't moved in a while. And it's funny because certain positions you never think, like, how is this helping me? This slight change. And you don't, when you're lifting 150 pounds or you're bench pressing, you could feel it all over. But with the posture work, what I like is after you do it, you're like, huh, I'm feeling muscles that I haven't felt in a long time. And so that emotional connection to the body for me is so imperative, because when you sit in silence and you do the meditation, right? You're still addressing your mind, but your body's in a certain position and stuff, right? And that's why I kind of relate this work, posture work, like a yoga, physical therapy type thing, because you're challenging your body, not physically, but you're moving certain things that you never think. Like, to me, it blows my mind, because some of the newest routine that I'm doing is one of my favorite. And I did the air bench, and then my thighs were sore, but then I was doing, I can't remember the exercise, what is
Knee
that?
drops.
Knee drops. And I'm like, whoa, I'm just, especially in my groin area, the muscles, I've never done an exercise like that. And I actually think, and I think it's true, it's really creating more strength in my groin area to feel like I can, for years I couldn't stand in one place. I had to keep on moving.
Right.
Because the pain in my knee, even knee replacement, the muscles and the tissues are just, I don't know, and now I don't have that. And it's because, and I don't want to go off on a tangent, but
I think what's interesting in that is that you make progress over time.
Yeah.
And some of it is so subtle.
And it's not an overnight thing, though.
No.
And I think it's like, if you're only going to dedicate like 20 minutes on one exercise, you're not really doing yourself justice. You have to accept some challenges that you may not even like. Like, there's some positions that you put me in that I'm like, I'm not enjoying this. However, being someone who wants to explore things that I keep on saying no, and I'm not doing that anymore. Because when you're like, I want to be more comfortable, I want to take an exercise and just do it once a week, you're not going to get anywhere. Like, you can I guess, move forward.
No, all movement is good movement.
Yeah, okay.
Adding even 1 day a week is better than none days a week, but
But
it
where do
depends
you,
how
yeah,
fast you want to go.
yeah,
There's in Egoscue, that's my certifying, that's where it all started, postural alignment. Uh, Egoscue, Peter Egoscue worked with athletes.
yeah.
He was a jock, so he knew that mindset.
And it was in the
But lots
military
of,
too.
yeah, in the military, warriors.
And us in the military, it wasn't about movement and everything. It's like you did what you were told.
Yeah, which can be drop and give me 40 or whatever, right?
Like
It's
on the
it's about
treadmill.
being physically fit, being very capable at the
Mhm.
drop of a hat. So I don't even know where I was going with that, but it is
Getting
a
balance.
co-creative process. So I have to meet the client where they're at today, whoever this client is. This could be my mom at 91, this could be my friend who's had spinal fusion, a surgical intervention in the spine for pain management. It
Knee
could be
replacements.
a teenager who sits 12 hours a day at their computer. You've got to meet the person where they're at, and each one of those individuals will have a very different take on movement.
Yeah.
Some of them, especially the young, they still have so much capability and they need to have fun. An athlete is all about like, give it to me now, I need to get back on the court.
Yeah.
I have a competition coming up on Friday, and if I'm not there, there goes my career. You've got to meet that person. That person may be doing 2-hour sessions so that they can get back to where they can do their sport. So it depends. There's a lot of different people who walk in the door and need different entries in
Yeah.
to
I
the
mean,
work.
some people are
Now, I was just
obsessed.
saying before, now, when I started, it was like 3 days a week. Come on, where's my rest days? Now I do this every day. And if I don't do it, I feel a little bit like I haven't brushed my teeth. Not that but it's so much more than that. I don't really, when I'm brushing my teeth, have this kind of wow, experience where
Hey, brushing my teeth.
whereas oftentimes with my posture work, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
The body moves in so many different ways, has so many different things that we can explore. And then it seems like you're doing one thing and then you go back and retest something else and you've made progress, but you haven't even done that.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating.
Yeah. And I think that this leads to more questions about
There's more questions.
helping clients stay motivated with the progress. Feels slow or subtle.
Yeah.
Because I think in society, those who've been to the gym or been to programs or have had personal trainers or done yoga classes, blah 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 blah. At first it's like, oh, this is invigorating and everything, and then we go home and we go right into our old routine, or we have a routine,
Or we have a
but we're not,
setback.
yeah, or we have a setback, or I'm not motivated because I'm depressed, or
It's raining outside, I'm not going to go for a walk.
yeah, or like I'm not feeling anything. I don't understand, why aren't I feeling it? And I think we're influenced from our past as children, as adults, what pain, no gain. Like we mentioned this before in our previous podcast, that somehow we are expecting to see major change or major improvements. However, if you're only doing it for 10 minutes once a week and it's just one exercise, let's say static back, which by the way, we're going to show some things. Like, I mean, we're just getting into the podcast, but I'm going to do some cooking. Mary and I are going to do some like showing you what static back is or stuff. But that motivation about the progress, I personally think that if you're only going to have one role, one position, and you do that once a day or once a week, you're not going to see much progress. You may see a little bit, but you're only training one part of your body. So that's why you have multiple different
Right.
exercises that works with the entire body, that addresses that one point or that pain point, that challenge. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, your challenge, you have your whole body addressed. And I think sometimes people are wanting to feel pain, to feel like they're accomplishing something.
Again, totally different person,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
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 So
So how do you help
something,
that? Like, I guess the question is, how do you help them? How do you help them stay motivated as a coach? What are some things that you would recommend working with you to stay motivated?
hmm. um,
And if you don't have the answers, it's okay,
well, I think it's
because it's a
unique
deep
to each
question.
individual, and I
Yeah.
can certainly talk from my own personal perspective.
Yeah.
Um, I was motivated over time by my goal. My goal initially, like I had this hip problem to where we would go on these road trips, and after 6 hours, my left hip was becoming really
Yeah.
problematic.
Pretty grumpy.
I I was like, okay, we have to stop. I'm sorry, but I have to get off the road. I have to get out of this position for hours, meaning that we would have to get a hotel. And I thought was, I was like, really? Is that going to be for the rest of my life? Is that going to keep progressing in this way? So I wanted to change that trajectory. That if I had continued down that path, which included a lot of movement, a lot of effort on my part, but I wasn't getting results out of it, I could see myself ending up in a place where road trips were not even an option,
Yeah.
Um, I have seen subtle changes over time with my hip. It's been a personal journey, a personal exploration. I find it absolutely fascinating. Um, and the little funny things that I found along the way that have really helped me have been, well, we mentioned static back. One day I was doing my postural exercise and I did something and I had like a big release, and suddenly I was doing something and I thought was pretty simple, and then suddenly I was not doing something and I'm just like, whoa, what happened? You know, I got up from that and I was like, am I okay? And I tried it again and I was like, okay, my muscles are like, don't do this. For the next 4 days to a couple weeks, I was really careful with my body,
Mhm.
but I had something in my toolbox. Or a couple things, I should say. I had static back, for example, that I could get into that position. And even though my muscles were aggravated, I was able to relax, and that it was a therapeutic type of relaxation that really, really helps with the general alignment and posture. So the outcome is good. I had to take a step back because I was basically minorly injured, but it's funny. It's like, you're minorly injured. Oh my God, I'll never do that. But I had made progress kind of too fast because my body had suddenly released. And so I had to pamper myself, but I still had my goal in mind.
Well,
I
and
still had my menus. So then I started going, okay, this part of me feels a little weird and unstable. So maybe I'll just let that rest and do the static back, but I can still move my arms, So I did my upper body exercises, and I knew through the coaching process that there was a certain progression to the exercises that I could do and end on a safe note and keep the movement going. My recovery from that was very short. I came back so much more powerful and aligned, which was really kind of trippy and cool. And then in the end, I was back to that exercise again. And I had to, reduce the amount of time, reduce the reps, take a little bit of the load off, but I was able to reapproach it, and I got stronger, stronger, stronger. Now that exercise is a no brainer for me. So to me, and I'm a weirdo, right? I think that that is really cool. I had so many things in my toolbox, and I was my own personal coach in that scenario. But what I would do is I was working with a client is we would talk about it, and be like, it's okay for this. Okay, can you do this? Does that hurt? Okay, go ahead and do that. And then retest, so I'd walk you through it, but you'd have all those tools and you still have that goal going on.
well,
You would still want to achieve that.
and I also think you have to expect some change, and change sometimes has pain
It's funny.
because you haven't moved.
Well, this is a weird one, right? When I very first started, I was driving one day and I went to go make a left turn, and this arm, I'm doing this, right? Like, this is not
Yeah.
any challenge. Like, I do this every day, and I went like this, and this arm was like, what? What are you doing? This feels crazy. And it was almost to the point of pain. And I'm like, I don't even feel like sore muscles.
Right.
But when I asked that one demand through that arm, suddenly it was like my arm was like, you've never asked me this before, and I'm doing something really weird here, and I'm like, to myself, I'm like, actually, you're not. And I never injured the arm. I didn't have a release or anything like that. And little bit by little bit, I just kept doing my exercises. I kept the faith that I was putting the joints into the appropriate location, working on the balance, front, back, side, getting the rotation out of my body. And little bit by little bit, that went away. And now, and it sometimes comes back. I'll have that arm will be like a little bit like, what? But it's less and less and less. So I can see progress happening. And I would have never guessed that the work that I was doing would have affected that shoulder, not this one. We were doing the same thing on both sides, but this one was like, what? And it's probably because this shoulder was out of alignment.
Well, and I think it's really important because you've mentioned it a few times through this conversation. You keep on talking release. Can you talk more about what does that mean? Like, oh, I was driving, I was thinking, is it a release? So can you dive just a little bit more? Because I have one more question after this, but I want you to explain when you talk about releasing, my interpretation is that we hold so much of emotion and protection to our body that sometimes it prevents us to use all those muscles. So when we use those muscles unexpectedly, there might be a little bit of pain, or maybe you have to adjust your workout to let that kind of meld and heal. I don't even know if it's healed because you're not really injuring yourself. You're awakening things in your body.
Any kind of muscular effort
Yeah.
puts a toll on your muscles.
So when you say release,
Well, any muscular effort. So if you're weightlifting, you could do this, every day at the gym. You're doing your bicep curls. You're putting little micro trauma into the muscle. Then the body afterwards heals that up and you actually build muscle. That's part of the process. If you're holding tension, to get this to release, for some reason, this shoulder was doing something funky, right? And I got really used to that over time.
Yeah.
Eventually, I was consciously aware that I was doing that. And I started telling myself, you don't have to hold that.
Because it didn't start driving. It started prior to that.
Sure.
It's just moving that.
It was just like
movement awakened.
Yeah. Something in that arm
that you might have done that
I might have done, or I might have, over time that I don't even know if it's this, but might have twisted that arm into a funny position and would have, might have shown up in pictures, or might have shown up in my testing. I can go all the way up here, but this one will only go to here and it's bent, or whatever, we'll be able to tell that this shoulder's not in the right position. When I would lay on my back, it felt like my shoulder blades were completely like this.
Yeah.
Like one was in the right position and one was like somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah. So little bit by little bit, we've gotten those in a better position.
Okay. So release is more.
Well, it can be that, all of a sudden, say you're in a plank, and you're holding yourself in that position, you're breathing and it's really great. But what if all of a sudden, something releases, you end up on the floor. That was a shocking thing that happened to me.
Yeah.
I haven't had an experience like that since.
Yeah.
But there's minor little releases, of habitual holding patterns or things that are holding so tight because your posture, you're like this. Those muscles in your back are so long, but they are holding you from falling over, So if you can get back up on top, those muscles can release
Got it.
and they can get back to doing their basic job and be in that kind of active but
Yeah.
healthy space.
Yeah. And I think this is where the coaching comes in, because again, Mary can't really help address anything if you're not willing to be open on the direction or instructions
Or communication.
or communication. And I would just really encourage you to overcome that vulnerability, because she's not judging you and we're not judging you. Um, and just, I would also say, like, how often you meet with Mary, I would suggest maybe having a progress notebook or something so you can keep track with your conversation, and it just helps you be more engaged. And maybe by writing things down, sometimes it helps us still stay with the commitment. It's like our self contract. And I think that's really important, because we can get really distracted and we can get involved with our lives and have all the excuses in the world and still kind of come up with, like, I don't understand, I really want to do it but I'm not doing it, blah blah blah. It's an internal fight that we have regardless of the atmosphere and stuff, and it's not to hold Mary accountable for our behavior, but as a coach,
I think one of the reasons I chose the term alignment
yeah,
was because it's a continuous
yeah,
readjusting to whatever is going on in your internal environment, in your external environment, and trying to come back into that alignment.
this is great because this is the last question I'm going to ask you. And I think this format helps. So I'm filled with questions, but we're trying to keep the podcast in a modified timing so you guys can absorb the information. The last question. Okay. And I think this is going to help people too. What advice would you give someone who's just starting to explore this field? Like, wanting not explore the field to actually, do what you do, but put it, or unsure if this is right for them. So how would you help someone, or what's the first couple steps someone should take to maybe start exploring this?
This may not be, fueling green alignment, but for me, it was reading Pete Egoscue's book. And he has numerous books out there, but his most recent pain-free book is easy to read. It walks you through so much of the why. And, within that why, you're going to come up against things like I did, like 7 days a week, what, and at the end has a wonderful bunch of exercises that you can experiment with. That's where I started. I had an experience that I listened to a podcast. I was like, wow, what was that? Why did that make me feel better? And piqued my curiosity. And from that, I read the book and I started experimenting. And the book is very useful. You can do, we say, my pain is here. You go to those exercises. Oh,
Yeah.
something's changed. Now my pain is here. Go to that section of the book and do those exercises. And in that way, explore things. And, to me, I find it endlessly fascinating.
Well, I also think, I know we've had conversation with friends and family and stuff, and some people are in the middle of physical therapy and they think, I have insurance, I can pay for a physical therapy. And mind you, that's not saying you can't, or trying to convince you to stop that. That would be ridiculous and irresponsible for us to say that.
Absolutely.
However, what I want to say is that physical therapy, you only have a few sessions and then it gets expensive. Like, you have coverage like several months or several weeks, and usually it's like once a week, and depending on how committed you are, you're still going to need to work on it, and that's where the good habit comes in. And if you haven't read the book James Clear, Atomic Habit, you're missing out, because it changed my life. However, back to what I was saying, is that the commitment you have for yourself when you're in physical therapy or any kind of I guess, medical, physical, I don't know what you want to call it. This is just something that can continue on without the money, without financial, you know, control. And, it isn't covered on health insurance yet. I don't know if it is or not, but Mary is doing this because not everybody has insurance that covers physical therapy, and even physical therapy after the 8 weeks time frame or whatever, sure, their assessment. I've been through physical therapy and I did 9 months of it, and still I was not at the point where I was 100%. This process, this work, posture work, green alignment, has really helped me gain my confidence, given me more. I can bend more than I can before. I'm on the floor. That's what blows my mind. I still have a lot of work to do, because there's just certain things for years of not, your body gets in the static state or whatever, to where it's like it's adapting as you adapt, and you're not pushing, so it gets comfortable, blah blah blah. And this is where I think green alignment can help further your movement.
It works
On
beautifully with physical therapy.
Yeah,
You can actually augment physical
yeah,
therapy.
and yeah, the cost is cost. You have to respect the fact that Mary has done education, she's certified, she's constantly elevating her craft. And so for me, the money's worth it. And Mary's not all about the cost or anything, she's about your health. So I just think that, you know again, this is not to make you stop physical therapy and then change it up. It's to add on top of it, so you continue your foundation of strength and balance and focus, really, and the commitment to yourself, right? I mean, do you have anything to add about the two?
Well, there was a study that was done. Um, I'd say it's probably about 4 years old now,
Do you
but
have that
where
study?
I can put my hands on it.
Okay, because I'll put it in the links below.
Well, it's interesting because there was a study that kind of looked at standard of care, physical therapy, and posture work. Not posture work a la Mary Cay, but alignment, postural alignment work. And the standard of care would be go to the doctor, they give you some muscle relaxants, rest, and your body then heals. Okay, done. That's standard of care. Physical therapy is physical therapy, and then there's the postural alignment. The outcome of the study I thought was very interesting. Egosky was really excited about it. And when I looked at the study itself, the summary as well as the headline, they were like, well, people choose physical therapy. But if you read down, postural alignment work came out ahead of either of those other approaches because it made people feel confident.
Yeah.
It made people feel, good in their bodies. They felt, after the period of time of the study, they felt stronger, better, for the work that they had done. There wasn't that same feeling when it came away from, say, physical therapy or the standard of care, but they physical therapy was cited as the one people would choose because it was affordable. And because when you go to your physical therapist, it's a $40 copay. I get it. It's expensive to take care of yourself.
But but it's a continuing expense. Whereas this, you may pay for the coaching and the amount of work that I've seen Mary put into an individual is far more than the cost that she charges. And it's a one-time deal. And then there's some upkeep and everything, but it's a lifetime of change. Whereas physical therapy, you have 6-8 months of doing it, and then you're on your own until you re-up your therapy the following year. And most people, and I'm guilty at it as well, is like, after physical therapy, you think you've trained your body to continue with it. But sometimes you can't have your wife or your husband or whatever take your knee and slam it together, because that's what physical therapists do sometimes, like, you know, you don't have the equipment that physical therapy has. Now, some of the equipment, like the band and everything, good, okay, great. But with the posture, green alignment and the posture work that you would do in I'm trying to come up with this practice, it's a lifetime. Like, this is something that's inexpensive.
Yeah.
Invest in, it blows me away on how much we invest in food, how much we invest in entertainment, how much we invest in partying or drinking alcohol, drinking coffee, but somehow our health is not, we don't invest in our health, and therefore we have this, like, the price is too high for our health. And that just blows me away. It's like, if you're not willing to invest in your health, then okay, then I don't know what more you have to do. But and I think it's the easiness, like, like, I love a drink, but the amount of alcohol that you pay for is far more than what you would pay for a session with Mary Kay. I mean, yes, she's my wife, and yes, but I can't stress enough on how much she's invested in this practice and how much she believes in and passionate, and having a coach that's passionate about your health and is passionate about your movement and studies and listens and tries to come up with something, and really hoping that you gravitate, because at the end result you're going to be so much better at movement and the confidence, and I would just encourage you to have that conversation with Mary Kay. But again, Mary Kay can't force you to do it. She can show you, she can give you the advice all she wants. um you know I can show you too, but I'm not trained. I just am the result of how I applied this practice and how happy I am. And it's just made me so much more in tune, because I could be doing something and then next thing you know, the language is coming out of my mouth. I'm like, where did I get that from? And that's because I've educated myself the importance of this work. So, do you have any final thoughts? Like, we've talked a lot, and hopefully we've given more insight of this practice. I think next week we're going to show some pictures.
Oh.
Yeah. Some, like, we talk a lot about this. So I think the next episode, we're going to share some images, maybe skeletal work, or like what's like we talked about alignment, we talked about a few things, and we'll work together on the visuals. Um, and will help further the education about this work. So if you guys have any questions or ideas or things that you'd like us to cover, please email us at postureworkwithmarykay@gmail.com. The contact is down below, along with the website, the resources. Maybe Mary will find that study, can put it down there. Because, like me, I'd like to do research and make decisions based on some of the information. But really, it's just pick up a phone and talk to Mary and see if this works. She's willing to work with you in any way, aren't you?
Absolutely. I'm excited to work with you. So thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, and have a great weekend, and we'll chat next week. All right, bye. Turn this off.